All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel Bear. Hey, good evening. Yeah. My name is Daniel Bear, and I'm an event facilitator here with McClelland Robinson Booksellers. And before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Aninawak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, as well as the homeland of the Red River Métis. In addition, McClelland Robinson's Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Roostertown. And of course, we are incredibly pleased that you could all join us here tonight to welcome back Terry Fallis for his newest book, The Marionette. Let's hear a round of applause for him. And of course, a huge thanks to McClelland Stewart for publishing this book and making this evening a reality. And of course, we also have Deborah Bowers here with us tonight, who graciously agreed to host. Let's give another round of applause for Deborah. So in just a moment, you're going to hear a quick introduction from Deborah, and then following that, we'll go into a conversation. After that, there will be an opportunity for you to ask questions, or sorry, reading, and then a conversation, and then an opportunity to ask questions. So if you do have a question tonight, just raise your hand nice and high for me to see. I'll come by with this wireless microphone. That's only to ensure that you're heard on tonight's live stream for the folks who are watching at home and for the cameras here. And of course, I'll be back at the end to review signing procedure. But for now, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing Deborah Bowers. Deborah began writing short stories as a child using her grandma's typewriter. She became a published writer as a teenager and currently writes occasional book reviews and other features for the Winnipeg Free Press, including many insightful reviews of Terry's work over the years. Professionally, she has several years of experience in marketing and communications. Personally, she loves to travel and hates to cook. Deborah is a Red River Métis. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you, Daniel. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here tonight. And as Daniel mentioned, I've read and reviewed most of Terry's books over the years. So a couple of years ago, so 2023, when Terry was in Winnipeg to promote his last book, which was called A New Season, it seemed like it was high time we met. It had been quite a while since I felt like I knew Terry. So we had such fun a couple of years ago that we thought we'd get the band back together for tonight. So thank you for joining both of us. I should add that I indeed did the book review for The Marionette in the Free Press, and my review was published on October 11th. Spoiler alert, I liked it. So first, a bit of background about Terry. His first novel, you've probably heard of, The Best Laid Plans, won the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor in 2008. And in 2011, it was the winner of CBC's Canada Reads. His next books, The High Road and Up and Down, were finalists for the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor. And in 2015, he won the Leacock Medal for his fourth book, No Relation. His other novels include Poles Apart, One Brother Shy, Albatross, and Operation Angus. The Marionette is a milestone. Released on October 7th, it's Terry's 10th novel. I think that's really impressive. And if you haven't read it yet, certainly think that our discussion tonight might just help you decide to turn a page or two. So let's get on with the book launch, and please join me in welcoming Terry back to Winnipeg. Thank you, Terry.
How's that? Everyone hearing? Thank you for coming in such numbers. This is it's wonderful to be back. It feels like we've never left, actually. I just have this deja vu thing happening, even though it's been 2 years. But it's lovely to be back, and thank you, Deborah, for not just for the lovely review, but I realized as I hugged her coming in that it looks a little fishy when the author hugs the reviewer. But anyway, it was a lovely review, and thank you for your time. 2 years ago now, and looking forward to our conversation tonight. I thought we should start, or at least it was suggested I start with a reading, shall we say. So I'm going to read the first half of the novel. No, I won't do that. I'm just going to read the very opening. And maybe just because some of you are coming to it cold, Let me just tell you, the narrator is a guy named James Norval. He is a 53-year-old, quite famous Canadian thriller writer. He's written 28 thrillers in the preceding 28 years. All of them have been international bestsellers. Many of them turned into Hollywood blockbuster films. So he's that rare Canadian writer who has no financial anxieties. And you might think he would be completely fulfilled in his life. However, writing a successful series of thriller novels was his plan B. He really wanted to work for CSIS. When he was 25 years old, almost 30 years before the novel opens, he applied to CSIS. Am I stealing all of our discussion points? Okay, sorry, I just realized I'm telling something this word. He made it all the way through the process and to the very end, when inexplicably he washed out. He was rejected. And they wouldn't tell him why. They're a clandestine, secretive organization. They're not obligated to tell him why. And they didn't. And that disappointment has stuck in his craw for the nearly 30 years since. So his fallback position, if he couldn't live out those clandestine operations on the ground in the field, he would write about them. And in this novel, well, without giving too much away, he gets to live out his dream that from when he was 25 years old. So I'm just going to read from the very opening. He is known for getting the details right in his novels, making them feel more real. So he always visits the places he writes about. So this novel opens in Tajikistan because that's where his next novel was to be set. All right, bear with me and then we'll move on to the conversation. I was in one of the lesser stands when it all started. In fact, it was the least of the stands, the smallest to be precise. Tajikistan is not exactly a vacationer's dream destination, but I wasn't there on holiday. Most of the foreigners in the nation's capital, Dushanbe, were mercenaries, not tourists, and a few were spies. Oh, and at least one was a writer. When they dragged me into the interrogation cell for the third day in a row, something was different. Something had changed. There was an unwelcome addition to the room's furnishings. The handcart, bearing 3 stacked car batteries, complete with wire leads and alligator clips, still threatened from one corner. Also still there, along the far wall, was what looked like a waterboarding station. Well, the reclined chair bolted to the wet floor and the 7 full buckets weren't there so I could reenact that famous sultry dance scene from Flashdance. On day 1, I had thought the battery cart and waterboarding station were just provocative but benign props, strictly to intimidate. By day 3, I wasn't so sure, but I digress. That third morning, the new feature of my interrogation suite left me and my stomach unsettled and wishing I was anywhere else. Right next to the chair to which I'd been secured for the previous 2 days was a small table on wheels, upon which rested a stainless steel tray, its contents shrouded by a green surgical drape. That was not good news. Not good at all. My lead interrogator, I called him Yuri because I was simply unable to pronounce his real Russian name, held a rolled-up magazine in his hand. Not exactly the most intimidating arrow in the interrogator's quiver. Across the room, a man I hadn't seen before cowered in a chair. He did not seem happy. Then Yuri pulled the drape off the surgical tray. No, 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 that is not happening, I heard someone shout. Turned out I was the one hollering. Please, Mr. Norval, Yuri said in thickly Russian accented English. I explain what kind of accent it is so that you will know what I'm trying to effect. Where was I? He made a show of unrolling the magazine so I could see it. Uh-oh. Nope, not today, Yuri, not today, I screamed, thrashing around as much as my restraints permitted. To the casual observer, I probably looked as if I were merely vibrating, but that's what thrashing in a good restraint chair looks like. Try to be calm, Mr. Norval, Yuri said, patting my arm. I recently read an interesting piece in the New Yorker by, now, who wrote this article again? Oh, yes, here it is. What a strange coincidence. It was written by none other than the famous thriller writer James Norval. And here you are as my guest. It is, what do you say it? Uncanny. Anyways, in your article, you described with your usual commitment to detail your most unfortunate encounter with gum surgery. I could feel myself shaking my head violently without meaning to. Let me quote from your article. Here we go. Quote, I don't know why interrogators the world over haven't added gum surgery or even just the threat of gum surgery to their persuasion protocols. I'd be singing like a bird at the first sight of an approaching periodontist. I really like that last part, he said, his tone upbeat. Look, I'm a novelist. That piece was just more fiction. It's what I do. I make stuff up. You can't believe everything you read in the New Yorker. Yuri ignored me and beckoned to the nervous man across the room. Okay, I think it is time, he said. Mr. James Norval, may I introduce you to Tajikistan's leading periodontist, Dr. Aziz Zadov. I didn't fully catch the doctor's surname as I had resumed my senseless shouting at the word periodontist, but it sounded like sadist. Great. I know what you're all thinking. What the hell is going on? Okay, I understand. You're confused. I get it. All right, let me catch you up. But I'm not going to catch you up. Very skill effective. Check, we're live.
I really enjoyed your Russian accent.
Kind of you to consider it Russian.
Russian-esque.
Russian-esque. I haven't quite sorted it out yet. It reminds me when I was reading from my first novel, The Best Laid Plans, where there's a Scottish character, Angus McClintock.
Right.
Someone came up to me after an early reading and said, that was Scottish? It sounded like a Russian Quebecer. I don't think you could sound like a Russian Quebecer if you worked at it, but apparently I was just a natural at that.
Okay. So in preparing for tonight, there's so many questions, of course, that I could ask, but I thought I would start, I think, with a bit of a boast as to how the Marionette is doing. Since it was released, it's been on the CBC Books Canada Fiction bestsellers list. So that's pretty incredible, Terry. Congratulations. And I certainly have some theories, but I am not the author. So wondered if you could tell us any ideas from your perspective about why it's doing so well and resonating with audiences so quickly.
Wow. Well, that's kind of a tough question to ask the author, who's humble and modest by nature.
And unbiased.
And unbiased. Well, maybe it's a bit of a departure from my other novels. And it actually has been following a similar trajectory to my previous novel. So it's not, I don't think it's doing better than the others have. So there may not be anything special about it, but it's certainly a great honor to be on the bestsellers lists, the various ones that are out there. And you may recall that John Irving is my mentor. You may recall also that he doesn't know that, but
Minor detail.
But I consider him to be my mentor, and it's an extraordinary thrill to see that John Irving is just above me on the bestsellers list, and we're like side by side on the list, and that is a great thrill. But I hope it's there because people are enjoying reading it, and that we've perhaps determined that it is possible to write a comic thriller, despite the contradiction that those two terms seem to imply when you bring them together. And, I had a lot of fun doing it, and maybe that's coming through on the page too.
That's a very good answer. So wanted to do a sort of a quick review. Thinking about tonight, I had a look through my past reviews of your work, and it was a fun walk down memory lane. You typically write, of course, about communications and writing. We have that in common, politics, and so there's usually some incredible twists of fate, which are quite enjoyable. And then, of course, there's always the Canadian experience. No matter what's happening to your characters, there's that Canadian element, which I think speaks to most of us. And I think that's sort of appreciated, and it's somewhat expected from your readers. But for the Marionette, you certainly return to what you know best. I think political satire, comic thriller, we can call it a number of things right now. You certainly have some adventures thrown in for good measure. And even in terms of when I was reading certain chapters, I think I had the Mission Impossible theme sort of running through my head, depending on where I was with the Marionette. So can you tell us, for novel number 10, what was it that brought you to the comic thriller genre?
Well, it's a good question. I always try, when I'm thinking about what the next novel is going to be, I'm always trying, at least after my first, say, 5 novels, I'm trying to do something a little bit different with each one. I don't really want to repeat myself over and over, which I think my first 5 novels are all different, but there's a lot of similarities in their sort of structure and voice. So I wanted to try something a little bit different. And so I made the decision to try to write a comic thriller to try and balance these two seemingly disparate themes that don't exactly coexist easily. But I also wanted to set it in a different country. I want it to be very Canadian, to still feel Canadian. And I think there are enough Canadian elements in the story to achieve that, even though much of our time is spent in, well, not just in Tajikistan, although that's just the first few pages, but in Mali, West Africa, a place, well, I'm just about to confess that I've never been there, but I should maybe not do that. But I have never been there. We're not supposed to go to Mali, by the way. It's not a place that tourists are encouraged to go, nor is Tajikistan. So that's what I will lean on when I say I didn't go there. I'm not really supposed to go there. So I tried to come up with a storyline, and as we may talk about later on, it turns out the storyline I thought I was inventing, after I wrote the manuscript, almost everything that I wrote in the novel has actually happened in real life. Almost everything. So, which was not intentional, and I'm quite alarmed by the parallels, and hope that I had nothing to do with making them happen. But that was quite bizarre. So I wanted to write a comic thriller. I wanted there to be that tension that you get with a thriller. I wanted there to be the humor that you get with my more sort of traditional novels that I've done in the past, while not sort of letting the pressure off the reader so much that there's no longer any tension there. So it's kind of a waltz I had to do as I was writing. I'd amp up the tension, and then there'd be something funny happen, maybe just a funny line or a funny scene, and the tension would come back down with that, and then I have to ramp it back up again. So it was sort of a 2-step forward or 1-step back approach to writing. But I certainly had fun doing it, and I've liked reading thrillers when I was younger. Frederick Forsyth, Robert Ludlum, maybe a little of Tom Clancy, but I still read Daniel Silva novels now, which I still think he's a great thriller writer. So this may not be a real bona fide thriller, because you can trust me, if you've read my other novels, you probably could predict that there's not going to be a heavy body count and lots of blood on the ground, because that's just not really the stories I write. But there is potential for that, and I want you to feel that potential now that I've told you that there's not a heavy body count. I forget what the question was.
That's good. It's all good. So you spoke a little bit about your new protagonist, James Norval. So as you mentioned, he's the author, and apologies everyone, I didn't know what Terry was going to say a few minutes ago. But you know, he's an author, he's Canadian, best-selling books, many of which were made into Hollywood blockbusters. And then in terms of the writing what you know, I'm kind of curious about how much of the characters' self-deprecating humor, willingness to take risks is a part of you versus a part of the character. You could talk a little bit about the similarities and the differences with you versus the character, because that must have been a fun dance.
Well, it was, and I should confess that, I mean, I don't write myself into the novels. They're not autobiographical. I've never been to Molly, as I've already mentioned. But the one thing that I probably borrow from me in most of my novels is the narrator's voice. I donate my voice as the narrator's voice, which is why some people think these are autobiographical, because the narrative exposition and the dialogue from the narrator, they kind of sound like me. But I've chosen to write in my voice, not because I'm the character, but because it's easiest for me to write authentically and persuasively in a way that you will believe that the voice is a true voice, rather than me trying to make up a voice that's different from mine and try to make that convincing. Because I'm quite familiar with my voice. I've been using it for 65 years now. So that's where that comes from. But as for real experience I might have had in the clandestine world, I can confess that I have not been a CSIS agent.
That's what you say.
Now, I was going to say, now, if I had been a CSIS agent, I might still be saying that. But when I was much younger, I certainly was the member of a clandestine organization. It was called LAPI. Oh, you don't know what LAPI is? I'm sorry, let me explain. LAPI stands for Leaside Amateur Private Investigators. I was 10. My identical twin brother, Tim, who was also 10, by the way, and our friend down the street, we formed LAPI after spending a summer reading as many Hardy Boys books as we could. And we thought we could do this. And we used the Hardy Boys Detective Handbook as our guide. And our biggest case, our only case, was, it happened late one night, Friday night, the wee hours of Saturday morning, actually. My brother and I shared a bedroom growing up. And we woke up in the middle of the night, screeching tires, a metallic thud, and more squealing tires. And we didn't know what had happened, but at first light, long before the police got there, we looked out the window and a car had run over the neighbor's lawn and knocked over the street sign and then squealed away. There was a hit and run. And we got out of bed and we went over there, and we didn't have any crime scene tape. I don't think that was a thing then. But when the police arrived about 20 minutes later, there were Tim and I, we were scraping blue paint flecks off the signpost into an evidence bag, into a sandwich bag. And that was a breakthrough in the case, Deborah, because
Absolutely.
it meant that we had narrowed down the culprit to a blue car in Toronto. So that case remains a cold case to this day. But you know, we had a lot of fun doing that. We had little business cards we made up. We had code names. We had little gadgets that we had developed, and it lasted for about 3 or 4 weeks at least, I'd say. But,
That's forever when you're 10.
well, that's when I was imprinted with this idea of you know, that clandestine world. So.
Okay, that's quite a backstory.
And it's all true. I think I'm making that up. I'm not making any of that part up.
So building on that, write what you know philosophy, and I'm hoping others that you've discussed the book with haven't asked you this, because this is kind of a fun question for me. But you do, in one passage, describe the James Norval character as having a very pedestrian palate. So I gotta know, like meat and potatoes, what are we talking here in terms of that?
Right. So that's me talking about his character in
Yes.
his novels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in his novel, he writes this this series of spy novels featuring his CIA spy named Hunter Chase, which I thought was such an awesome name. Maybe we'll talk about the names afterwards, because we have a few people in the audience tonight who know about those names because they were intentionally
Yes,
used.
Russian names.
Yeah, so okay, so that might be an autobiographical part of the novel.
Just curious.
I have a rather pedestrian palate as well. So it was easy for me to write about that.
See, okay.
And there's actually a food scene in the novel, you may recall.
Yes.
Am I jumping too far ahead?
No,
Okay.
I'm not, I don't dissect the
Okay.
dinner, it's okay.
Yeah, there's a dinner, a presidential dinner that welcomes him to Mali. And it was fun and alternately painful reading about the food that my character was about to eat.
And then, so that was sort of the fun question about the food. Now, something I know you're probably more passionate about talking about, and you did touch on already, is related to CSIS. That was certainly a question I had, because there was a thread throughout. You've already mentioned that the main character, that James Norval, was interested when he was in his 20s in becoming a member of CSIS. It's certainly a big part of the novel. And I wondered if you could explain a little bit more about why CSIS is such a part of the novel, your interest in it, your knowledge, your research, or whatever you're allowed to tell us.
Well, the easy thing for me would have been to make him a CIA agent and not be such a Canadian novel. But I'd like to write Canadian novels. So CSIS was the right one, the right choice, the right organization to use. And something happened back in 2022 that made this particularly relevant or meaningful to use CSIS. Before 2022, I think it was, CSIS was not authorized to work clandestinely in other countries. But there was a federal judge sometime in 2022, I believe, who made a ruling, and for the first time granted CSIS permission to operate secretly in other nations, and even, this is interesting, even break the laws of those nations in defense of Canada. There was a tangible security threat that CSIS agents were allowed to go in other countries and break laws if necessary. And that had never happened before. It's the kind of authorization that MI6 and the Mossad and the CIA have had since the inception of those organizations, but Canada never had that authorization. Didn't mean that CSIS wasn't doing anything until 2022, but they were certainly circumscribed in what they could do. And mainly they did it from our own shores. There weren't a lot of CSIS, as I understand it, weren't a lot of CSIS agents operating in the field, as it were. And I learned something when I was writing Operation Angus, which was, you might consider, my first attempt at a comic thriller. I met with a guy named Phil Gursky. It was complete serendipity. I'd chosen just recently to write this novel about an assassination attempt on the Russian president in Ottawa, and that Angus and Daniel tried to crack that case and solve it, which was a lot of fun. And just as I'm beginning to mull this story around, this guy named Phil Gursky contacted me. And he was previously, for a long time, the intelligence advisor to the Privy Council office, and was a veteran of CSIS, a longtime CSIS analyst with an expertise in terrorism. And he said, I've written all these terrorism books and nobody reads them. Can we sit down and talk about how you market books? And I don't know why he thought I had some monopoly on how to market books. But as soon as he said he worked for CSIS, I said, how about next Tuesday? And he took the train in from Ottawa, and I think it was Ottawa, and we met, and we spent a long time talking about his books and marketing them. And then I picked his brain for about an hour on how CSIS operates, and what someone who was about to write a story that featured clandestine organizations, intelligence organizations and agencies ought to know. And he was very helpful. In fact, it was he who said you should call that book Operation Angus. Because, not to get too far off the Marionette, but Operation Angus, that was bringing Angus back after 5 novels where he was nowhere to be seen. So I wanted people to know that Angus was back. So I had already decided to put Angus in the title, but I didn't know what the title was going to be. He said you should call it Operation Angus, because that's how they name their operations in most intelligence agencies and certainly at CSIS. So that's where that name came from. It's been more than you wanted to know.
That's all right. That's all right, because it actually segues perfectly
That was
to
my intention.
my next question. So on the topic of characters, we certainly have some new characters, some thrilling adventures, but you absolutely, to sort of quote Taylor Swift, brought us a couple of Easter eggs. There are some familiar characters that readers of your work, including Operation Angus, will know. So curious if you could talk a little bit about, we've got Federal Minister Angus McClelland,
I've heard of you.
and former CSIS senior staffer Vivian Kent. They've both made a few appearances in the Marionette, and it was a lovely surprise for those of us that know the characters. But why make that choice?
Well, if it was going to be a CSIS novel, in a way, you may recall that at the end of Operation Angus, Angus McClelland was promoted in cabinet to Minister of Public Safety, which meant that he had ministerial purview over CSIS. So if I was going to do a CSIS story, why don't I take advantage of the current Minister of Public Safety, Angus McClelland? And we intentionally didn't write in the cover copy that, and stay tuned to see Angus again. So it just, but I do talk about it in my book talks, but I hope far more people are reading the novels than have listened to me give a book talk. So there's lots of surprises for people who may know Angus and all of a sudden turn the page and there he is in the flesh. And so it's not an Angus McClelland novel, it's a James Norval novel, but Angus plays some important roles and it was really fun bringing him back, and Vivian Kent, whom I adore as a character as well, continuing my effort to give older women meaningful roles in my novels. So I had fun. I'm planning out that scene where the big reveal that
Yes.
Angus was there. That was a lot of fun, and it meant I had to relearn the Scottish accent for the audiobook.
Have you dusted that off?
I have dusted it off.
Run a few lines by us?
Well, I think I do the Angus accent certainly better than the Russian accent. But so it was fun getting back into that. I remember when I first started doing it, I had no idea what I was doing, but you keep practicing and it comes back.
Prove it.
Prove it. Well, I could read a little piece from that if I can find it.
Yeah.
You want me to look for something?
Yeah. Oh, I think that's a yes. I think.
Okay, hang on.
I think that is a yes.
Should we do the reveal scene? You already know what's going to happen.
Do that.
All right, so.
Yeah, because he shows up pretty early. See, I'm trying not to give too much away.
No, exactly.
You have to read it. You got to read the story, but.
Here we are. All right, so.
Okay.
He gets rescued from our friend Yuri in Tajikistan colony, correctional colony number 7.
Before gum surgery, just so we make that clear.
Yeah,
no gum surgery took
That's
place.
Right.
Okay.
So he's rescued by a Canadian diplomat from Kazakhstan. You're saying, why Kazakhstan? Because we do not have diplomatic relations with Tajikistan, but we do with Kazakhstan, neighboring Kazakhstan. So he drove all night and saves him. Drives him to the airport where, strangely, there's a Canadian government jet sitting on the tarmac. And he climbs up the steps and enters the jet. He said, I had no time to take in the luxurious compartment because I was startled to recognize the man standing before me, his hand extended. Ah, we've been looking for you, Mr. Norval, said the man with the distinct Scottish brogue. I still want to put that in so you know I'm doing. Straggly gray beard and the most chaotic hair I'd seen in a very long time. I'm Angus McClelland, and they tell me I'm the Minister of Public Safety. Oh, and do not let my wee accent confuse you. I serve the government of Canada. Oh, I knew who he was. So did nearly every Canadian. It hadn't been that long ago when McClelland, along with his trusty sidekick and executive assistant, Daniel, I forget his last name, bravely thwarted an attempt on the Russian president's life during a brief Ottawa stopover. It played out like the finale of a Hunter Chase movie, with the notable difference that it actually happened. But that's another story. Let me go on here. Yes, Minister, I know who you are, and I'm very pleased. Let me reiterate, very pleased to see you, I said. I cannot begin to tell you how grateful I am that you somehow managed to find me. Well, laddie, we'll come to just how grateful you are in a wee bit. But just to confirm our embassy's report, you don't require the services of a doctor, do you? It just goes on like that. But
Wonderful, thanks, Terry. I think your accent is coming along.
it's coming along. Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Yes, we'll let you catch your breath after
Oh,
that.
that's a workout doing that.
Yes, absolutely. So switching gears a little bit, so in terms of the backdrop, for those that haven't read the novel yet, there's a Canadian business set in Mali that is a mining operation. And it was really interesting to read about the community investment piece. That was a bit of a surprise, a positive one at that. But I wondered if you could talk a little bit about why you chose that industry, and what may be truth, what may be fiction. But yeah, a little bit about the impetus of choosing that, because it's a really, really interesting portion of the story.
Sure, absolutely. So why Mali, some of you may be thinking first off, and I wanted to choose a country that was essentially lawless and a dangerous place. And to choose the country, I consulted what's called the Fragile Countries, Fragile Nations list. And there is a list compiled, I believe, by some organ of the United Nations that ranks every country in the world against things like human rights abuses, corruption, what else? Unemployment, economic, I say depravity, but not, but bad economics in their country. The level of democracy, how people actually get to vote, and Mali is in the top 15, as the least fragile, the most fragile states around. They have a history of coup d'etats. There have been 5 coup d'etats in Mali in the last 40 years, and more frequently in the last 15 years or so, usually a military coup. They are also a country that is blessed with considerable natural resources, particularly precious metals, gold. And there's also one part of Mali where gold and diamonds coexist. That seems like I'm making that up as a literary license to put in the novel, because that does play a role in the story, but it is true. It's the Kaneba region, and it's up in the northwest of Mali, near the Faleme River, which is just across the river is Senegal. And believe it or not, these are novels, they're made up stories, but I want them to feel like they're real, and I want them to be plausible. And if you were to do a bit of research, you would find that Barrick Gold, Canadian Gold Company, has a big operation in Kaneba region of Mali. So totally realistic that I could put a Canadian mining operation there. And it's run by a woman named Monique Tardif Resources out of Montreal. She's the son of the company founder. They have very different philosophies. The company founder passed away, and she inherited the company, and she is the CEO. But he was very much a profit-mongering kind of entrepreneur or business leader. She is very much into doing the right thing and not just coming into somebody else's country and stripping the country bare of its resources and flying the proceeds out of the country. So she has committed a huge amount of time and money to invest in the community so that she's lifting up the community as well. So I was trying to model what I consider to be good corporate behavior for Canadian companies operating in developing and sometimes lawless nations. So they built a health clinic and a job center and a counseling program, schools and that sort of thing. And so that's sort of part of it's sort of a backstory or a side story in the novel, but it was intentional on my part. Have I said everything? Oh yeah, so let me just carry on with that. And when I say it's realistic, after I finished the manuscript, I touched on this earlier, a year after I gave the manuscript to my editor, we were still in the final stages of editing, but the book was essentially done. I read 2 articles about the Malian junta's takeover of the Barrick mine in Mali, which is not exactly what happened. In the novel, they nationalize the mining industry and keep all of the profits for the country, the government. In real life, what happened is they seized the mine and they flew a military helicopter in and they literally stole 35,000 ounces of gold, which is $117 million worth of gold, and just stole it. And I don't believe it has yet been resolved. I think Barrick and the government are trying to sort this out. But you think that I've written a novel that sounds a little far-fetched. Not far-fetched at all. It has actually happened since, which made me worry that I was causing that. But CSIS has not called me or anything. So, anyway, so that's why I said it in Mali and in the mining industry, because that's what happens in Mali. It's a true scenario.
No, it really is a fascinating part of the story. I really liked, maybe that was just the Canadian heart behind it, that there was a CEO trying to do good in the community while also taking the nation's resources. So it was really interesting juxtaposition. But as tends to happen with us, you are giving me another perfect segue, because I did want to touch back on you talked about the thriller part and back to the comic part of that thriller. And on the topic of Monique, so she is the CEO of the mining company. I must actually do a read of my own, because when I read, James Norval turns out has a bit of a thing for this character, but when he first sees her, I must read the description of her attire. She wore a gray work shirt with lots of pockets, the kind Marlon Perkins used to wear when hosting Mutual of Bahama's Wild Kingdom, one of my favorite nature shows as a kid. I assumed she was wearing pants of some kind, but her desk blocked view of her lower half, unquote. So on behalf of Gen X and up, just thanks for that, Terry. That was childhood. But a quick follow-up on the topic of Monique, and I know you are reticent to have a lot of characters return, but it seems like the relationship is almost scratches the surface and gives one hope. Might she return in a future story?
That's a good question. Or might any of these characters return?
Yeah.
It's possible, and those of you who read the novel will know that I have left the door open at the end for there to be subsequent adventures or adventure. But in a way, you will determine whether that happens. If the novel does well and people seem to like it, it's quite possible it'll be, those characters might return. I doubt it'll be set in Mali. It'll be a whole new adventure somewhere else, I think. But I haven't given a great deal of thought to that. I've already written my next novel, which is a short novel, which is why it's already done. But it's got nothing to do with these characters.
Okay.
But I may well come back to James Norval and his cohorts. We'll see.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We won't hold you to it, but I'd be interested for sure. And then finally, I kind of like to talk a little bit about the title itself. It kind of snuck up on me, to be honest. It wasn't the most obvious choice. I thought that was also very clever. And without giving sort of too much away, what you can share with us, can you talk a little bit about the title?
Yeah, I had the title very early on in the novel, and I can tell you a couple things here that you can read on the flap on this cover copy. It's not a giveaway, but if you're wondering how James Norval, how does he get wrapped up into this affair in Mali? Well, when he's on the plane, Angus and Vivian play him the video of the newly installed president's opening news conference from the presidential palace in Bamako, which is the capital city of Mali. And he's sitting behind this giant presidential desk with these massive bookcases behind him. And there are 28 books on the bookcase. They are almost in perfect chronological order, all of the books of James Norval. His favorite thriller writer, and he was schooled at Harvard, his favorite thriller writer is James Norval. And he arranges these books in a certain way that is suggestive of something. I won't go any further than that, but it's really how CSIS gets into Mali. They ride James Norval's coattails into Mali. And a young, experienced 28-year-old, I think she is, CSIS operative named Lauren Cooper. Thank you. Sorry, when you write another novel in between, it takes you a minute to figure the character name. Lauren Cooper is her name. She's a Jamaican immigrant to Canada when she was a kid and grew up. And she's a fun character. She's tough as nails. She's not happy that a civilian, James Norval, a thriller writer, is on this case with her on this mission. She's in charge of the mission. She's the senior operative, but in the cover story, she's his research assistant. So there's an immediate kind of disparity in power externally rather than internally. So it's James Norval doesn't really know how real clandestine operations work. He knows Hollywood clandestine operations with airstrikes and car chases and gadgets and submarines and missiles. And so it's his ignorance of the reality and her intolerance of amateurs makes for some interesting opening relationship building between the two of them, because they are the two in charge of this mission to get the Canadian mining executives out who are being held basically so they can keep running the mine. What was the question, Deborah? The title. So now, the Marionette.
I got lost too.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not surprised after what I just said. So the Marionette, someone has their strings being pulled in this novel. I'll leave it to you. You will figure out very quickly whose strings are being pulled. But in a way, there's more than one marionette. I think James Norval was a bit of a marionette in the early going as he's learning what he's doing. He's making missteps. But the one who you think might be the real culprit in this story may not be the real culprit. So I'll leave that with you. And I have the title very early on, which is usually what happens when I write a novel.
Okay.
And having the title, in a way, keeps me grounded in the story. So yeah, there is a particular marionette this refers to, but in a way, there's more than one to lesser degrees. But anyway, so I think the title is apt, but you may not realize that until maybe 3 or 4 chapters in, then you ought to know.
No, that's a really good answer, because I did see a few different characters that the title spoke to. For me, anyway, just had to ask about the title. And Terry, I'm thinking of last time we got together, we spoke the whole hour, we didn't have audience questions. So I'm trying to be really good this time out and acknowledge that Daniel is here and would absolutely like to maybe follow protocol. So we aren't extracted by thesis agents, Terry. We follow the rules this time, that we might have some time for audience questions, if that's what you'd like to do, Daniel.
Exactly.
Hey,
That works
hey.
out perfectly.
Okay.
He wasn't standing there for no reason with the mic
Yeah,
right
so
in
I
front
felt
of
it. Yeah. Well done.
him. Wrap it up.
Hi, I have two questions. One is, I see that we're in a wedding now, so I assume you have a partner. So, my first question.
This is interesting.
That's the first proposal I've ever had.
My first question is, would your partner say that you have a great sense of humor? Think you're very funny. And then my second question goes to more the process of your writing. And I understand you sort of like do a blueprint before you start any of the writing, but do you set a minimum expectation of how much you will write in?
Good question. So let me start with the beginning, or the first question. I do make my wife laugh. It's not as easy to make her laugh as it once was. That's what happens when she's constantly assaulted with my sense of humor. She's heard many of my lines more than once, so the laughter diminishes with the frequency of the same line. I think she would say I have a good sense of humor. She's become somewhat inured to it, as one might, living in such close proximity to me. And she may not have been particularly happy about my last novel, A New Season, which is the story of someone who is mourning the passing of his wife. And the number of because I write in the first person and the voice is similar to mine, seriously, people came up to me and said, "Is Nancy okay? I'm so sorry. What happened?" So she's fine. She's standing over there. So yes, but she's. I think she thinks I have a good sense of humor. But if she were here, she might debate that. But she's not. The second part of the question: do I have an expectation for how much I will write? It's changed a little bit now that I've been retired for the last 3.5 years. I wrote my first 8 novels with a full-time job. So now I'm retired, largely because I'm married well above my station. I'm writing full-time, and I get up every morning with joy in my heart, and that I can write. So when I was working full-time, and I was at that stage right at the end of the process where the whole thing's been blueprinted and mapped out, already spent 12 or 14 months getting the story, developing this outline, a scene-by-scene bullet point version of the novel that runs 85 or 95 pages. That's what guides me when I get to the stage of writing the manuscript. I would commit myself to writing at least 1 chapter a week, which that sort of happened on the weekends or late at night. And my chapters are about 5,000 words. And I've sometimes written a 5,000 word chapter in one day. But that's because I know what I have to write there. I've got this whole blueprint. I just have to write the words now based on the 2 or 3 pages of bullet points. The whole scene is mapped out, so it's not that onerous a task. But now I can do it, all day long, and sometimes all night long without any real consequences, except internal family consequences when I do that. So I will, and when I'm at that writing stage, I will often write a 5,000 word chapter in a day. And so I write the 85 to 100,000 word manuscript in about 2 months. And I know that seems fast, but remember, I've spent 14 months getting to the point where I can then write the manuscript quickly, focusing all of my questionable cerebral powers on the act of crafting sentences. No part of my brain is occupied thinking about what my character is going to do next, on the next paragraph or the next page. I know what they're doing throughout the novel. So I really can focus entirely on the sentences themselves. And that's, I take joy in that part of the exercise as well. So that's how it works for me. Beverly Richardson took my course a couple of years ago now.
Yeah. I just last winter.
Was it just last winter?
Well, last winter I asked too late.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Anyway, so she's a very talented writer herself, and I was very shocked to find her in Winnipeg because you don't live in Winnipeg.
And I was born here.
Yes.
Terry, I was really curious to ask you this. I noticed when I read through your books, which I actually did in chronological order because when the new season came out was when I first read about you, and then I thought, well, I'm going to start at the beginning, and I just loved reading all of them, and I noticed the different amounts of how much tension would be in the plots, such as this one. I have saved this one. I have not read it yet, but I imagine there's more and more in this one.
I hope so.
And so I wondered about that. I know you more from the humor perspective, from taking the course, and some of how that's constructed possibly. But I'm curious about this now part that creates the tension in the plots. And have you looked at that as a system of way of, with tools that actually create the tension part, or does that come osmotically from the reading you've done?
Yeah, well, did everyone hear the question? Yeah. I don't actually know. I think I've read enough thrillers that I think I can probably, I think I know the techniques that amp up tension. Danger is one of them. Running out of time is another way to build up tension. Unanswered questions, when the reader doesn't know what's happening, that can build some tension. So I wasn't conscious of saying to myself, okay, it's time to use this technique for tension. I haven't done that yet and employed that. It came more organically when I was writing it, but I realized as I was doing it, probably in hindsight, that I was, oh, that's the section where I am building tension. And that could be an encounter with one of the villains in the story, where the villain makes clear things that might happen. That automatically raises the tension. So I recognize the need to do that, or it's hardly a thriller if there's no tension. Things that are surprises. There's a surprise towards the end that amps up the tension quite dramatically. You may see the seeds for that surprise earlier in the novel, little breadcrumbs that you can follow. So yeah, I think there is a technique, and leavening it with humor in a way is a disservice to the tension side, because if people are laughing or you're laughing, you're releasing tension. So then you have to amp it up again a little bit. So things happen that that make the tension, I hope, not always oppressive, but certainly present and of concern, certainly for the characters in the novel, but for the reader as well. Because the more affection you have for the characters, which I also try to engender in the reader, I want you to like these flawed but generally good-hearted characters. I want you to like them. Therefore, when they are in peril, it deepens your concern, and the tension is even higher. So there's various techniques that are being employed that I'm just considering as you ask the question.
So if you're not sure what to do, have a guy listed with a gun.
Right. Yeah, that's right. It always helps to have people with guns there. Really, the presence of a guard with a high-powered rifle slung over his shoulder, that immediately amps up the tension. And those guards play play a regular role in this novel from the midpoint onwards. So that might be a cheap and easy way to do it, but it's a tried and true technique.
We have time for another question there. Yeah.
The periodontist definitely was tension. Now the periodontist thing came from, sorry, we were right there, it was, I had some gum surgery in the last few years as a result of a ball hockey injury I had. I ate a hockey stick during a game. It was not pleasant, and strangely enough, my lips were untouched. They weren't even tapped. They were unchanged, no, not inflated. My two front teeth were snapped off, and other teeth were broken. But amazing precision that I could do that without having a fat lip or a bloody face. So kudos to me for that. But it launched me on a 5-year orthodontic odyssey. I had braces for a while. Anyway, you don't need to know this, but
Next novel.
yeah, next novel. But it's why I thought of gum surgery as a rather novel approach to interrogation. Please, sorry.
That's great. I wanted to say that I just discovered you as an author last year, and I've read all of your books, and I just borrowed the Marionette from the library, and I read that in 2 days.
Wow.
And I'm thinking to myself, do I have to wait another year now for another book? So I'm really happy to hear you say that you've written something else, and I hope it's not going to be a whole year.
Well, usually it's 2 years between books, just to remind everybody.
Yeah.
I'm a book every 2 years. It was not my choice, that's my publisher's choice, not wanting to step on the sales cycle of the previous novel by bringing it out too early. However, the one I have written, which is, it's not finished, the manuscript's written, we're now in editing. It's quite a departure from what I have written before. I set another writerly challenge for me to try to meet. Did I mention it's a short novel?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's only about 42,000 words right now. It might get a little bit longer, but not much longer.
Does Marlon Perkins play a
No,
role?
Marlon Perkins is not in
Okay.
this one,
Just
nor is Angus. What does 42,000 words translate in pages? It's probably about half the length of the Marionette. That's probably the easiest way to consider it. So it'll be 150 pages, something like that. And there's a trend towards short novels. And I read several of them, and particularly Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These. Yeah, an amazing book, 20,000 words long. It's an astonishing book. And I thought, 20,000 words, am I going to feel fully satisfied and nourished after reading such a short novel? Yes, I was. Astonishing piece of work. So I wanted to try to write a short novel. I had this idea for a novel that I couldn't use my regular larger canvas to tell. It was better told in a smaller space. And I have written that, and it's a quieter novel. It's a little more literary, he says, hopefully. It's not what you would describe as a comic novel, though there are brief flashes of humor, only because I couldn't help myself. But it's not a funny novel, and it's really, when I say it's quieter, it's about the writing life in a way. And I had so much fun and joy writing it, and I hope that translates to the reader, but we'll see. So there's been a pseudo tentative agreement that the book will come out next November, so a year from now, and which is unusual, but because it's so different, and it's likely to be a hardcover, my first hardcover, but a small package, small book that you might see close to the cash sort of thing. It's not a regular novel for me. And it's so different that they're not worried about, my publisher's not worried about sales dipping on the Marionette, because this is just so different and will probably feel quite different. I'm not abandoning my more traditional novels. I'll be back to one of them, I assume, thereafter. I actually have a second short one teed up, ready to go as well, which we'll see how well the first one goes. So,
Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to that. And I think while I wait for it, I'm gonna start reading all your books all over again. I just want to say one more thing is that I actually am also a twin.
oh, well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed One Brother Shy. then.
Yes.
Thank you.
You had mentioned something about Hunter Chase and that people here might know the names.
Sure. Let me talk about that. Thank you for the prompt there. I often will use family names, sometimes from people who have passed away, in a way, a quiet honor to them. My last novel, the character's name was Jack McMaster. McMaster was to honor my university and my university experience because it was a life-changing experience for me. Not everyone has those sorts of experiences at university, but I did. And the Jack was from a senior university administrator at McMaster, whom I would be knocking heads with on a weekly basis when I was president of the Students' Union. And he was my chief, counterpart in the university administration. And we would agree to disagree. Our discussion never strayed from the premise of mutual respect. And I came to love him. And we had a 45-year friendship. And I would see him at least once every year until he passed away in 2022. And I was privileged to be asked to speak at his funeral. So my character is Jack McMaster because of that. In this novel, the character's name is James Norval. James is after my father. James Fallis, a pediatric surgeon, passed away in 2019. And really, the fact that I'm a writer is likely due to my father's reverence for the English language, his love of language, and his commitment to proper grammar usage. Which was a daily event in our house. But he had a wonderful sense of humor, and so I use James. The Norval comes from my great uncle, Norval Hunter. And he was a really enterprising young man. He ended up running as president of the paper mill in Espanola, Ontario, in the 40s and 50s and into the 60s. And he's my great uncle because he married my maternal grandmother's younger sister, Gwen, who was a stunningly beautiful woman. And if I were doing my regular book talk, I'd have her picture on the screen at the age of 18. And she looks like something out of The Great Gatsby. She has a flapper hairdo. And she was a stunner. She was born in 1910 and passed away in 2014. So you can do the math. Okay, I'll do it. 104 years old. And so she became Gwen Hunter. And we have the cousin of Gwen Hunter's daughter, who was my godmother, Annie Marty. Where is she? There she is. So she is a cousin to the family, and I knew she was coming. And did Linda McClelland make it? Oh, there she is. There's another member of the family as well. So I wanted to make sure I made that point because this novel is dedicated to Norval Hunter and Gwen Hunter, who were important people in my life growing up. So you would never know that if you didn't come to a book talk. I don't write about it in the acknowledgements, I don't think, but there is a dedication to them in the front of the book. But you'll often find me using family names in my novels, only if they work. If it was a really weird name that didn't work, I wouldn't use it. But when I can, I do, and it's kind of a fun little thing within the family.
Alrighty, before we move on to the signing portion, because we are at that time now, let's give a big round of applause for Terry Fallis. Yes, thank you to all of you for being here tonight, and another thank you as well to McClelland Stewart. We are going to move along to the signing portion of the evening, which is going to take place to my right. Feel free to have a book signed before you pay for it. Just make sure to visit the cash desk before you leave. They do like it.
There's a German Shepherd waiting at the front door.
Exactly, yeah. So look out for
And some
that.
CSIS agents too.
Yeah, of course, yeah, they're just outside the door, actually. Lovely, but yeah, we have plenty of copies of the Marionette here, as well as some other of Terry's other books here. So if you want to pick those up, they're right at the table here and at the cash desk. Thank you all.
Thank you
Another
for
thank
coming.
you. Yeah,
Thank you.
exactly.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you. Yes, thank you both. Have a good night, everyone. Actually, I have something for you, Deborah.